The original title in Italian of Nini's story was Nonna Fiumana racconta, and it contains several chapters relating to Matilde's younger years, and there is a second book that deals instead with her life after marriage and her moves from Italy to Australia and the return at the end of the life in Italy. So I will start with part relating to the introduction. As you can see, I've written this account of events in my life mainly for you, my grandchildren. I've written it for all of you equally, as I have loved you all the same. I've written it so to be near you in a special way by telling you my life story, which has been varied, challenging, difficult, but at the same time wonderful. The Lord has given me profound experiences which have taught me a lot, just as I would like for you to learn from them as well. When you read it, I hope you will feel me close beside you in a way I have not been able to be during my life because you live in Brazil. I will not read the acknowledgements, but I will read what follows, which is entitled My Mother. I first got to know my dad when I was 5 years old. There were a few reasons for this. My parents, Giacomo and Francesca, Fanny, of Istrian stock, fell in love quite young and married young, she at 19 and he at 20 years of age. In doing so, they flouted the customs of the day and above all the wishes of Fanny's father, Tony, my grandfather. My grandfather was an individual personality. A former sailor from Austria, he was tall, slim and athletic, the picture of energy and capability. He was indeed a father figure for the village where he lived. When he became angry, his resonant, powerful voice could be heard in all the 4 adjacent villages. His eyes would flash and could reduce you to a quivering mess. His facial features were striking, not just because of his deep black eyes, but also on account of his big ears and his magnificent blonde moustache. They used to call him Uhon, which I think means big ears. His moustache was out of the ordinary. It was thick and long enough for him to twist with his fingers, to form a curve upwards, to almost reach his eyes. We grandchildren were frightened to death of him, but at the same time we loved him. In spite of all this, my mother had the courage to take the decision to leave home. To get to where she was going, she had to go on foot, all the 70 kilometers from Sumba, which was near Fianona, to Fiume. Her only baggage was a rucksack, which was made from a long strip of cotton material stitched to make 2 compartments. It hung from her shoulders with one sack in front of her and the other behind. It was really for collecting grass to feed the pigs. Into it she stowed her trousseau, but how could she manage to leave home without being seen? Her family home was on 3 floors. On the ground floor there was a stable, on the first floor the living area, on the second a large undivided room containing the beds for all the children. On the side of the room near my mother's bed was a window, beneath which was a high heap of manure. This was made up of cow pats like large cakes, which were dry and mixed with straw. Fanny would not have been able to go down using the stairs, as they were attached to her father's bedroom and the noise would have woken him up. The only way down was through the window down onto the manure heap. This little problem did not discourage her at that time, because they wore layers of long skirts. So she put on the 2 or 3 she had to act as a sort of parachute to cushion her fall. Down she went and she was free. They married in the church in Tersato near Fiume, which was a sanctuary of Our Lady of the Sea. Indeed, all around the altar area the walls were covered with votive offerings, giving thanks to the Blessed Virgin for graces received by the people in times of sickness and peril through her intercession. There were pictures there showing stormy seas along with the ships saved from the fury of the water, together with many surgical aids such as bodices, artificial limbs and crutches. It was a touching sight to behold. Many years later, my mother-in-law, Rosa, took her son, Cide, your grandfather, to the Sanctuary of the Blessed Virgin in Loreto to seek a miraculous cure for him. Cide became my husband, but you grandchildren never knew him. Only you, Suyan, ever saw him, but you were too young to be able to remember him. Because of a fall when he was young, he broke a kneecap, which caused him great problems, which meant that he found walking difficult. It was for this reason that his mother, Rosa, took him to the shrine of Our Lady of Loreto. He recovered completely and became able to walk. Some 25 years later, in 1945, the Second World War finished on the 25th anniversary of their marriage. It was autumn, but all our family went barefoot to Tersato to thank the Lord for the success of their marriage and for all of us being unharmed in spite of the many dangers in the war. I refer to our family because straight after their marriage, their 3 little girls were born: Milka in 1919, Mary in 1921, and I, Nini, the third daughter, in 1922. My real name with which I was baptized is Matilde, but for my sisters who were still little, there being only 3 years between Milka and I, it was very difficult to say such a long name, so they called me Nini. This was always my name in the family, but when I emigrated to Australia in 1968, I became Matilde to everyone. My parents. After their marriage, my mother and father lived in a little 2-story house in Valsugine in the district called Rastocine. From there you could enjoy the panorama of our very beautiful Gulf, a wonderful view. The house sat on a large block of land which the couple, both country people, cultivated very efficiently as a vegetable garden. There were already some fruit trees there, and they planted potatoes and many types of vegetables, enough to cater for the needs of a family. However, there were many needs, above all because Fanny, my mother, by the age of 23, already had 3 daughters, and I was only 6 months old when our father decided to leave for America to earn some money, and he did just that. He had a special talent for business matters, one which none of us, including my own children, have shown. Anyhow, our father set off in 1923, at 27 years of age, leaving our mother with the 3 little girls. Father did not have enough money to buy a ticket for the ship. At that time, the journey to New York took weeks. However, he had made up his mind and left as a stowaway. One of his friends worked on the ship and found him a hiding place in one of the lifeboats. It was a challenging and dangerous voyage. He suffered from heat, cold, hunger and thirst, but he came through it and arrived in New York. There he immediately set about learning English and finding a job. He did dishwashing at first, but when his English improved enough, he worked as a waiter. He came home after 5 years. I called him Uncle because I didn't know what Daddy meant. My inability to call him Daddy must have been a sad and painful experience for him and my mother, but they did not try to make me do so. Throughout this 5-year period, our mother had to cope with everything by herself. The first months were dreadful, as she did not receive the money the father sent her. Also Milka, who was 3 years older than me, was always ailing, but interestingly never had health problems for the rest of her life. How did my mother finally cope with getting our family ahead in those difficult conditions? Providence is great. In the little group of houses, some 4 or 5 families lived, all of them large and poor. However, all of them in different ways helped this healthy, young and pretty mother who never asked for anything but did all she could herself. Fanny spoke only a Istrian dialect which sounded to the villagers like high-pitched mouse or bird talk because it was a mixture of Venetian and Croatian dialects. But this was not all. In actual fact, she did not have the knowledge of all the duties which a mother of a family needs to get by. In the village, everything was reduced to subsistence level, but mother's neighbor, Mrs. Libera, came to be her guardian angel. This lady had 4 children of her own and little money, but was rich in terms of herself as a person. She taught our mother all she needed to know with great affection and patience. She taught her to cook, do the washing, iron, sew, embroider, speak the Fiume dialect, and write, as mother had to write to my father and reply to his letters. My mother only attended the first year of primary school, as my grandfather did not allow her to go to school because there was too much to do in the house. Therefore, Mrs. Libera and her family gave my mother reassurance and a constant source of support. I well remember my father's arrival home. He was a fine, jolly man and wore a smart hat. I'd never seen a man's hat before. We continued to live in that little place on the mountain, and I started to attend school when I was 6½. I'd never seen anything other than what lay around us. The day after his arrival, my father took me into the city to buy me a tricycle and a doll. We were not used to having toys. When we got back home, he gave me a big silver coin worth 20 lira, quite a sum in those times, and called it my little fortune. Near us lived a fine family with 6 daughters, one of whom, Michelina, was my grandmother. So, with a little fortune, I ran there straight away and said, "Here you are, take it, and buy yourself a fur coat, shoes and a handbag." For me, with that coin, you could buy anything. It was a sign of power. In that little group of really poor families, as I've said, my mother found a lot of help in all circumstances. With the produce of the vegetable garden, which she knew how to cultivate and use, she was able to get our family ahead. She never lost hope, even though she had many and varied problems. She knew how to deal determinedly with Milka's many illnesses and with the strong and rebellious personality of Mary, who tried something different every day. In the meantime, Father was thinking about how to set himself up as a waiter in the city of Fiume. My holidays in Istria. I have sweet and nostalgic memories of the summer holidays I spent with my grandparents' home in Istria. Usually only Mary and I went because our elder sister Milka had to stay home to help our parents in their restaurant. I think we started going there in 1930 because we were older by then. Mary was 10 and I 8 years old. Our parents did not go with us, as the journey, although it was not far, took many hours. This was because there were no motor coach services then, only the steamboats. These took the long route along the coast of Istria, which fortunately was very pretty, varied and enjoyable, filled with views of the sea, rocks and stretches of green. We used to leave behind the style of living in Fiume and arrive in Fianona, where life was much simpler. There, waiting for us, were our grandfather and Uncle Beppy. For the journey on the steamboat, our mother put us in the care of a sailor who was a business client of ours, and who volunteered to deliver us into the care of our grandfather. At that time, life was poor but uncomplicated and safe. So our mother was completely relaxed when we were with our grandparents. The coast was full of small bays with many villages with little harbors where the steamboats stopped. You passed through Volosca, Abbazia, the Pearl of Carnaro, Laurana, Icici, Ica, Emedea, etc. To dock, the steamboat used to have to make many maneuvers, making a lot of noise, thus losing a great deal of time, especially when the sea was rough and disembarking needed special attention. All these simple but very pretty little places used to welcome our arrival with much gaiety. They would fill up with people, children and the elderly, passengers getting on and off the boat. All were happy and talkative. For them, the arrival of the steamboat was a real show to be seen and experienced, similar to the TV and cinema of today. All these different places had a feeling of liveliness, yet at the same time of tranquility and safety. They had a feeling about them of relaxation and wonder, because at each stop the scene changed, but each gave us a warm welcome. To experience those places were like living in a lovely, enjoyable fairy story. How else, after 75 years from when I was so little, would I be able to recall all these details so clearly? On board, nearly all the passengers were country folk or country women to be exact, all dressed in black with a head covered by a large black scarf. On the deck there were their big baskets, empty now, as they made these journeys to sell their fruit and vegetables to the people in Fiume, which at that time had a population of some 40,000 people. The women all seemed old, but very nimble and in good health, even if their faces were full of wrinkles. After about 3 hours the boat arrived at Fianona. The little harbour was more or less wedged in a narrow sea inlet bordered by high mountains. It was in fact a magnificent fjord which could be especially appreciated from above. The sinuous movements of the sea, so clear as to be almost transparent, contrasted with the varied greens of the mountain with its peaks silhouetted against the brilliant blue of the sky. These contrasts of colours, so different but at the same time in perfect harmony, provided a unique spectacle which took your breath away. Towards the rear of the harbour was our grandfather, waiting for us with the gig. Yes, a gig indeed, but what is it? Today they are no longer used, as we have cars to carry us everywhere. But at that time the gig, which was a vehicle, sort of midway between a wagon and a carriage, was an ideal means of transport for 2 or 3 people. Then there was Brits, the horse which pulled it. He was strong and athletic and trotted along nicely, especially when grandfather gave him a good clip on his backside with his long, flexible whip. Grandfather drove along happily singing, with Mary and me seated beside him, happy, feeling safe and in good hands. The journey to our grandparents' house took about an hour and a half, and the road was fine, wide and white, without any other vehicles. It was all ours. Mary and I really liked travelling along that white road in that fresh and clean air and with beautiful trees and fields surrounding us. But at last we arrived at their house. In the village of Samba, they knew we were due that day and were all waiting for us, the adults and the children. It was a great joy, an event for them, as it certainly was for us. To get to the house, it was necessary to leave the main road and turn right into a narrow lane, then turn left, where immediately there opened up a large irregular open space from which you got the first glimpse of a very special view. Immediately on the right was a circular pond. The water was terracotta coloured, as the earth around was full of iron. This water was the only resource for the village, as there were no wells nor other drinkable water. The pond water was used for everything, for animals and men, or other women, as it is there where they had the job of carrying the water to the house for all their needs. To do this, a particular and laborious method was used. The cows and sheep, when they returned from the pastures, were tired and thirsty. When they drank from the pond, the sheep dropped their little pellets and the cows their big pats. All of us drank this water, which was not disinfected nor filtered. No one worried about it, because no one in the village used to get ill. All this is strange to us now. It makes you think. It shows that men live in close contact with nature and they do not get ill. On the left of the pond there were 5 villagers' houses, right in front of which rose a wonderful, majestic, imposing tree. Its luxuriant fronds were a lovely shelter for everyone. It gave out an invitation: welcome, sit down and take a rest. Indeed, all around the base of its trunk was a comfortable, pleasant stone seat. It seemed to be saying, "Rest here, you who are escaping from the heat, the rain and weariness." Truly, that tree was always something special for me, a kind of vast presence. Opposite this luxuriant tree was my grandfather's house. It was large, spacious and comfortable, although then there was no inside toilet. To do the necessary, you had to go about 100 meters into the nearby area, which had plenty of trees with special sorts of long, soft leaves, which were a perfect substitute for toilet paper. They were ideal, as you just picked 1 or 2 leaves and that was it. Something important and noteworthy to realize and relate is that I never trod on anything unpleasant. The arrival at our grandparents' house. As soon as we arrived, we were ready to go and play with the village children. There was lots of room all around, space for everything, and the children were about our age, which was perfect for us. The young families were large, even though there were few men around the village. A lot of them had gone overseas to work, especially to America, the great land which drew them because of its many opportunities and new openings. Indeed, 3 of our uncles had chosen this path and I never met them. Others were in the fields. In those times there was no farm machinery and everything was done by hand. Still others worked in the bauxite mines. Indeed, the big pits of red earth were everywhere to be seen. Meanwhile, grandfather unharnessed the horse and, having stroked it, took the gig, which was very light, and put it away in the big hut made of straw, where he also kept the big wagon for the heavy work. This hut was situated near the big tree and the house. As for us, Mary and me, we set off to play, but first had to take off our shoes. Why so? Because all the village children went barefoot. Shoes cost too much, so they didn't have any, and we naturally didn't want to be different from the others. So off with the shoes. At the beginning it was hard going and painful to walk and run on our tender feet, which were not used to such hard ground so full of little stones. But we didn't say anything. We braved it out, and after a few days it was a lot better, as the soles of our feet began to harden and form thick, strong skin like a protective glove. We felt completely liberated, as there were no jobs to do and no fixed commitments, but of course we had to go to the house to eat. We were too young to help where they didn't even have running water. We would just have been in the way. However, we took the cows and pigs to pasture along with the other children. We used to take them out of their stalls to lead them to pasture and Flick, the guard dog, would help with the pigs, of which there were a lot. With the help of Flick, they were safe, as he kept an eye on everything and made sure all was under control while it fell to us to herd the cows. However, as these were taller and had longer legs, they could move around very easily and shift some distance away, so they had to be stopped from wandering. We did this by hobbing the 2 front legs at the ankle with a strap so that they could hardly move them. There were 2 hobbles, 1 for each leg, which was simple but effective. They need to be seen to appreciate the neatness of their design. In drawing A is the 1 centimeter wide strap made of light, flexible and outwearing material, which fitted over the cow's hoof. B is a little stick which fitted through 2 holes made in the strap. A little explanation now. Matilde was an art teacher, and the memoirs she wrote are all illustrated with her drawings mainly. Continuing with this reading. Anyway, we used to take the cows and the pigs into grandfather's pasture fields, which were at quite a distance from the house. We used to make our way as a group, singing and laughing until we arrived at the correct spot. One day, right in the middle of the field, was a big hole in the red bauxite earth, all fenced around with 3-pointed barbed wire, as it was a hazard for the animals. That afternoon I was playing with the others along with my Aunt Maria, who was our grandfather's youngest daughter. She must have been about 14 years old and was the group leader. All of a sudden I saw that one cow had gone very near the hole, the barbed wire was there, and so was my beret. Instinctively, without saying anything, I got up suddenly and ran headlong for my beret without any thought, passing under the barbed wire. I felt an unexpected pain on the top of my head. In my rush to save my beret, I had touched against one of the lower barbs of the wire, which made a long, straight cut on my scalp. No one had noticed, not even my aunt, but they heard my cries. It could have been very serious. The cut was near to the brain, but luckily it hadn't gone far enough in to make a serious wound. I have no memory at all of what happened after this incident, but probably everything turned out well without anyone thinking about tetanus nor any other complication. No doubt there was someone above looking after me. Another time, however, things were more difficult. On this occasion, just my Aunt Mary and I went to pasture the cows, as Mary was not there that year. We arrived at the pasture, a big field a long way from the house, where there were a lot of young boys whom we didn't know. There were many trees, both large and small, which many of the boys were climbing, and at a certain point I felt the urge to do the same. I went ahead and did just that, climbing to reach a high point. But when I came to having to get down, I found myself in trouble. I had no idea what to do, and above all, where to put my knees. It ended up at a certain moment with me losing my support and with one of my arms and leg dangling in the void. One only, I have to say, as the other leg caught on a little twig stitching out from the trunk of the tree, and part of this had gone into my leg. And there I was in the air, attached to this sort of little hook which was supporting all my weight. What kind of hook was it? It must have been sharp and pointed to have penetrated. How such a thing was possible I will never know, but there I was, fixed, with the twigs sticking into my flesh. Of the boys there was no sign, they had all gone, and my aunt was left alone with me in that condition. I remember that I didn't cry nor shout out. I was 15 at the time. We set about getting me down, but we didn't succeed, as it was not the right way to go. The branch was lodged in my flesh and the position was serious. Some lateral thinking and quite a bit of strength were required, but Aunt Maria was not all. She was, however, decisive, brave, and energetic. She had to lift me up, taking me by the waist to get me off the branch and let me down to the ground, and indeed she did all this. But how did she manage it? Who gave her the strength to anchor her legs firmly on the ground, take hold of me, lift me off the branch and let me down? And straight after there was another problem. How would she be able to carry me on her shoulders all the way home? There was no one about all the way there. I'm convinced our guardian angels were at work again. At last we arrived home, and grandfather saw us straight away. He understood the situation and lost no time in talk. He was at home by himself at the time. He took a careful look and saw that my wound was the size of an euro coin and deep, which worried him. It was gaping open at the part where the weight of my body had borne down on it. I remember that looking at it I did not see any blood, but a lot of white fat among the pink flesh. Heaven help me if it had bled. I would have been draining in blood along the way. What did grandfather do to make me better? Nearby was a big fig tree from which he plucked a nice leaf. He placed this just as it was on the wound, where it stuck to the fluid coming from the damaged tissue. This was all he did, no antiseptic, nothing else, except that he changed the leaf when it became dry. This was the only treatment I received, yet little by little the hole began to close without becoming at all infected, nor with any other problem. Everything went well. It was as if there had never been a problem. However, I was left with... The book continues with several more chapters, which I will not read in this particular presentation, except for one towards the end of the first book, which just will be read in part. It is entitled How My Father Brought Us Up. My father Giacomo, who was your great-grandfather, was extremely strict with us. He had to be like this, even though his character was totally different to how he felt he needed to behave with his daughters. Our city Fiume had an endless stream of males coming from all regions of Italy to do their military service. Therefore, there were soldiers, seamen, and officers to be found everywhere. We three sisters were always totally free, as no one could keep an eye on us since our parents were in the family restaurant. This is why Giacomo had to guide us with his punishments. First of all, given that there were three of us, we had to be a self-sufficient unit. He did not allow us to have girlfriends, let alone male friends. If we got into real trouble, he employed the following method. Because he could not chastise us in front of his clients, he'd add up all the situations requiring his intervention, like when we were unkind to the cook, waiter, or maids, and made us pay for it at the appropriate time. When such a moment arrived, he would warn us that on that night he'd be home earlier, and we knew what was going to happen. As soon as he arrived, calm and serene, he wasted no time. He would say nothing at all and proceed beating us one by one with no dialogue to start off with, just action. First it was Milka's turn. She was the eldest and therefore the one with more responsibility. Mary was the second and I the last. At the end, after having beat us all, he often used his belt, but it depended on the seriousness of what we had done, what he would use, He started telling us about his life as an orphan without a mother. He would continue to talk about when he was 14 years of age and had to go and work on ships, doing the toughest and humblest of chores on mercantile sailing ships. He would then finish off by telling us all the sufferings he had endured under the Austrians during the First World War, 1914-1918. By the end of his story, I was like a fountain, and I could not stop my tears. I cried because I loved him very much and because I felt terrible at the thought of all he had to endure. It so happened that Milka and Mary, having asked for his permission, would subsequently take me to bed, and this is how these episodes would conclude. As I said, our father came home calm and serene in other words, neither nervous nor angry, but our punishment had to happen. This was a way of educating us, which I fully understood only much later. Why was the system educational? We all had to learn about proper behavior and how to always control our tempers, even though this is a very difficult thing to do. Well, I hope you enjoyed this selection, and hopefully there might be more to come in the future. Thank you for watching, and till the next time, bye.